Hello class, welcome back to Play Analysis and Interpretation. We continue in our analytical journey today by looking at Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. We'll be examining this play or analyzing this play in relation to language. So far, we have explored plot, we have explored theme, we have explored character. So today we are looking at language in relation to Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Now let's bring out the facts about the play. These are the hard elements of the play. Every play has some facts about when it was written, where it is set, who wrote it, and all that. And so these are the preliminary elements that you tease out upon your first reading so that you get a sense of where this play is coming from, when it was written, where it is set, and it guides you in your understanding of the play should you go deeper to analyze it. And so, as I stated before, the play was written by an American playwright, Arthur Miller. And the time of composition was 1949. The time of action, post World War II, he set it in his present, which was 1949, post World War II. But then in his description of the place, he alludes to today. And that also points to the enduring nature of the theme that the play explores. And so sometimes the play may be set in 1920, but then the playwright may write that it is actually set, that the time of action is today. And by writing today, it makes the play current all the time. And so in this sense, when we read Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, we know that this play can apply to anybody today. Anybody in the middle class working for someone else would identify with the plight of Willie Loman, even though it was written in 1949. And so this is something you should watch out for. When you see a play that is set today, it is very important because it helps you to think about how the issues addressed in the play relates to today. The dramatic time is, we can put it over the course of 3 days, but then in reality we have 2 days and 3 nights because it started in the evening when Willie Loman goes out to go on the road and could not focus on the road and had to come back home. And then the next day, where both he and Biff go straight to their bosses to try to renegotiate, or even in the case of Biff, to get a job. And the evening of that was when he had the confrontation with Biff, and then he kills himself, and the next day was the funeral. So it happens over the course of 3 nights, but then we had 2 full days within the dramatic action. So the place, as is stated by the playwright, is New York and Boston of today. This is what I was alluding to earlier. New York and Boston of today. So he's talking about the cities of today. It doesn't have to be New York and Boston, even though that is where it is set. You can relate if you live in the city and you understand capitalism and how it operates. The specific locale, Loman's house, his yard, Howard's office, and the bar. Now, what is this play about? Willie Loman drives out to go on his sales duties, but returns shortly after because he's unable to focus on the road. His wife convinces him to talk to his boss to allow him work in New York instead of constantly being on the road. His first son, Biff, had come to visit and really hopes his son can make something good of his life this time around. His relationship with the son is on the rocks because Willie seems to blame himself for his son's inability to make anything good with his life. To make Willie happy, the son decides to see an old boss to work as a salesman. Both Willie and Biff's visits to the bosses does not go well. Willie is fired and Biff realizes that his supposed relationship with the old boss was a lie. He panics and steals the man's pen. When the pen with the pen in his hand, he finally realizes he's not cut out for office work. Biff and his brother take Willie to a restaurant for dinner. And as Biff tells Willie about his visit to the old boss, Willie wanders off into a flashback, revealing how Biff caught him with a woman in Boston 15 years ago. Biff, in tears, assures Willie he does not blame him for how his life has turned out. Willie suddenly realizes that Biff does not spite him and makes the ultimate sacrifice of committing suicide to give his son something to have another go at life with. We are dealing with dialogue in this play. Of course, there are so many elements that make up a play. And in the journey so far, we've been picking one element each to discuss within a particular play. And what we've been doing in terms of the given circumstances helps us to understand how the characters operate and how the elements come together to communicate whatever it is we are trying to understand about the play. And so when you think of language, when you think of dialogue, we know that it is the verbal expression that is used to convey thought in the play. Without the verbal expression, we will not be able to understand what the characters are thinking, what their motivations are. And also, we will not even be able to understand the given circumstances because some of them are revealed through the dialogue. And so, in drama, dialogue or thought is conveyed primarily through dialogue. Thought is conveyed primarily through dialogue. You can have dialogue in various forms. You can have um, people talking to each other, or somebody like directly, or somebody speaking to another person on the phone. It all comes in the form of dialogue. And then there's also monologue, where it is just one person speaking his or her thoughts out. And then there is narration, where instead of a dialogue or a monologue, the story is narrated by a narrator or a group of narrators who tell us what is happening rather than the characters themselves stating what is happening. And in musicals, you have music or song, and the lyrics of the music becomes the language through which the thoughts of the characters are conveyed. So basically, dialogue is the conversation that takes place among the characters. So it is all the talk, including the monologues, the soliloquies, which is when a character steps aside to talk about his or her innermost feelings or thoughts. There's narration, choral odes when you have chorus within the play, songs, and anything else spoken by the characters. Mind you, it does not include stage directions. Dialogue does not include stage directions. Stage directions just give us information about the circumstances, what is going on, the circumstances that has brought the characters together or that is pushing the action of the stage. It can be either in prose or poetry, dialect, slang, jargon. All of these are a way to communicate through language. And the language or dialogue spoken by the characters can be concrete or abstract, formal or informal. And characters may speak in commands, questions, metaphors, or cliches. All of these help us to understand the stations of the characters in society, their level of education, their state of mind, and all that. One key thing that dialogue does is to help us to understand external action or to reveal external action. So the use of properties, movements, that is blocking, where somebody is standing, entrances and exits, sometimes special activities like playing piano or fighting. All of these things are expressed through dialogue, and it helps us to understand what is happening on stage. In Death of a Salesman, for instance, when Biff and Happy leave Willie Loman alone at the restaurant and later come home, and Happy gives their mother, Linda, some roses. She throws the roses on the floor, and when it messed up the floor, she was about to pick it up, and then she suddenly said, "Pick this stuff. I'm not your maid anymore. Pick it up, you bum, you." So she was instructing Happy to do something. In the end, it was Biff who picks up the roses and puts them in the bin. But then, through what she says, it expresses blocking. He had to move in a certain way to do something. It also expresses her own inner feelings and reaction to what they have done. And then dialogue, that is what leads us to the internal action. Dialogue is a form of internal action. It is used by characters to shape attitudes and provoke actions in other characters, like Linda did, where she said, "Pick it up, pick this stuff up. I am not your maid anymore." Another instance is where Willie Loman orders Biff when he finds him. That was in the flashback in Boston. He said, "I gave you an order, Biff. I gave you an order." But Biff's inaction tells us there's something deeper going on, expressing his inner feeling at that time. He was hurt. He had found out that his father was a cheat. And diction, I know you all know what diction is the technical and artistic qualities of language. That is the selection and arrangement of words, phrases, sentences, lines, and speeches. The way they are selected and arranged to give a certain effect is diction. So it points us to the technical and artistic qualities of language. When we say technical, we are talking about grammatic quality of the language. That is grammar, syntax, punctuation. That is the technical aspect of it. And then there's the artistic aspect of it, where dialogue or words are arranged in a way that makes the language beautiful and pleasing to the ears. And so diction is the selection and arrangement of words, phrases, sentences, lines, and speeches. It is really important that to understand the language in a play, you need to understand the basics of grammar, syntax, that's arrangement of words in a sentence to make a certain sense, punctuation, paragraphs, and so forth. There are when you pick up a play text, all you see are words. Words. When they all come together, they make a certain meaning. They say something to us. And you have so many characters in a play, but each of them have a certain manner of speaking that is related to who he or she is. Each of us speaks differently. We use different words based on our background, our training, our professions, and so forth. And so, since characters speak in their own voices, the words they use tell us a great deal about them, who they are, what they are, where they are coming from, their state of mind at any given point, their profession, even because of certain technical terms they might use. And so the choice of words helps us to understand character, because each character speaks in his own voice and they speak in a certain way. Now, when we talk about words, there are varieties of words that are used in a play. You can have abstract words or concrete words. The easiest way to understand the difference between abstract words and concrete words is to relate it to your senses, the five senses. Abstract words describe things that cannot be perceived by our five senses. Like, you cannot see it, you cannot touch it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it, you can't hear it. And so ideas such as love, ideas and feelings such as love. Love is something we perceive differently than the sense of touch. We perceive love differently. We say it's something I feel, but it doesn't touch you. It's not something that you can feel by touch. Honor. When somebody says, "Oh, I've lost my honor," it is bigger. It's not something you can touch. You can touch somebody's honor. You can hear somebody's honor. You can't feel by touch somebody's honor. Experience is something we perceive. We have felt it and all that, but you cannot perceive it by the five senses. Something like heritage, democracy, we know what it is, but then you can't use your sense of sight, your sense of hearing, taste, and all that to taste these abstract words. That's why they are called abstract. When you talk about power, you know what power is. Yes, you find instances of the use of power and all that, but you can't use your five senses to detect power. Knowledge, justice, hypocrisy, self-sacrifice, self-reliance, like Willie Loman says in his discussions with Howard. You can't perceive these by your five senses. So characters that use such words have a tendency to be reserved, affected, and aloof, like they have this standoffish behavior towards life. And then by contrast, when you look at concrete words, there are things that can be felt, touched, seen, heard, like flowers, smiles, books, car, a pack of seeds, like Willie Loman goes to buy, thumbtacks, hammers. They are vivid and emphatic, and the characters that use them tend to display that kind of traits where your language is not so abstract, you are straight to the point, you are as real comes. And so it shows also in the things you say. You talk about ordinary, normal things. When you look at somebody like Linda, Willie's wife, she's very real. She speaks in concrete terms. She does not speak in abstract terms. Now, on the other hand, we have formal and informal words. They also relate very much to abstract and concrete words, but then in a different sense. As the name suggests, when you go to a formal event, you speak in a formal way. You don't use certain colloquial or jargons that's misplaces where you are. When you are speaking with your lecturer, you speak formally. When you are speaking with your friends, you are more informal with the words that you use. So formal words, they are more elevated. That is, when you are reading a book that is written for a certain caliber of people, or even the very mere fact that it is written and published, you will find that the language is more formal. It has this elevated feel to it. And so you will find words such as satisfactory, illuminate, preserve, contribute. And they are also literary in nature. Formal because you find connectors that are used in formal writing, such as Willie Loman is not a very high class character. He's not a high class character at all. However, he deserves to be the focus of a tragedy. So you are making it formal by introducing, however, nonetheless, consequently, moreover, inasmuch as you find all of these in formal writing, which makes it very precise and deliberate. And it also takes out any form of emotions from it. By making it very precise and deliberate, you are making it formal and merely reporting in a very elevated language. Informal words, on the other hand, are very simple everyday words that we use at home and with friends. Okay, lit up. When he saw me, he lit up. You are feeling jelly. You are jealous. But then we say jelly. Give. What gives? These are informal words. And so they can be more emotionally direct. Like what Linda says when Willie came home right after leaving the home to go on the road. She asks him, "You didn't smash the car, did you?" She uses smash. "You didn't smash it, did you?" She didn't attempt to use any elevated language. Were you involved in a car crash? You know, did you have an accident? No. She said, "You didn't smash the car, did you?" Another way of identifying language is the use of jargon and slang. Jargon, as I have alluded to before, is the professional language that we use. They are mostly limited to a certain group of people. It's a specialized language. And so, in the medical jargon, for instance, you have a jargon like body packer, somebody who puts drugs in some rubbers and swallows them to go and unpack somewhere is the body packer. And so when it is used like that, it tells us who the person is. It tells us that, oh, this person is very much in tune with medical jargons. Also, the use of acute. Acute is also something that is used in the medical, it's a medical jargon that signals to a sudden development in a certain situation, in an illness or something. And then in academic jargons, or within the academic space, we have our own jargons. When I say signpost, I mean you should write in such a way that, I'm sure I've said this before, write in such a way that your reader knows what you are talking about at any given point. And so when you signpost by writing introduction, I know, oh, everything that I'm reading is introduction. Literature review. Everything I'm reading under this is literature. And so that is signposting in academic language. Also problematic. When something is problematic, it signals um a jargon in academic language that talks about problematizing a particular issue, or the use of something is not straightforward. It causes more problems. And then there's hypothesis. Hypothesis is guesswork, but then it is more informed than just guessing. You do some preliminary work and then you guess based on your findings. And so hypothesis. This is some so I hypothesize that it means I know what I'm talking about. It puts me within a certain space. And it is not every member of society who can use such words. That's why they are called jargons. They are professionalized and specialized language used by certain professions. On the other hand, there is slang. Slang is non-standard everyday words. And so they have special appeal in dramatic dialogue because they sound unusual, they are vivid and colorful. Like in Death of a Salesman, instead of saying the more formal Chevrolet, which is in reference to the car that Willie Loman had in the 1920s, they go like Chevy. It's non-standard. It's just a slang way of saying Chevrolet. This also points us to the level of the characters and also their relationship. If he were to be talking to somebody way above him, he's not going to say Chevy, he will say Chevrolet. So our recognition of such language as dramatic is very important because it gives it a certain kind of realism. It makes the play real because ordinarily this is how they will say it in their homes and between each other. And so you don't concoct anything. When you find characters using slang with each other, it helps us to better understand the kind of relationship they have with each other. And so communication is enriched by jargon and slang from the particular social groups within the play, as they also provide context. They tell us who these characters are, their social class, and the kind of relationship they have. Connotation in language is also very important because when you connote, it means that you are suggesting or conveying associations to a certain word in addition to the dictionary meaning of that particular word. And so when you use connotative words, it enriches the language and it gives us more meaning than the words we state mean. Like gentleman and lady, it means more than a man and a woman. Snake means more than a serpent. When I call somebody a snake, there is a bigger meaning to that. I'm not saying that this person is actually a serpent. I'm saying this person should not be trusted. This person is somebody who can sneak up on you and harm you. And gossip means more than talk. When you find people talking, you say gossip, there's a bigger meaning. It means they are doing more than talking. They are slandering. They are coming up with their own ideas about why certain things are happening and pushing those ideas forward, saying things that they are not supposed to say. So gossip means more than talk. So that is what connotation means. It means adding more meaning than the dictionary definition of a word. So they add extra meaning to these words, and these extra meanings come from our collective experiences. Because if you don't have that collective experience as a member of a particular society, when somebody says snake, you will just think, oh, where is the snake? But in reference to a person, we all collectively know that, oh, this person is a snake. Don't deal with him. So dramatists like to use connotative words because they add vividness without necessarily adding more words. The moment you say this woman is a gossip, it puts everything in perspective. You don't have to explain what she does every day and what she does with her life to provide that context. And then there are speeches. A line in a single continuous statement by a character is just a single line. Oh, this is a line. This is a line. To be or not to be is a line. Now, a line consists of a few sentences or less. Sometimes it can just be as simple as to be or not to be. And in other times, it could be more sentences strung together to form a line. Now, a line becomes a speech when it contains more than a few sentences, which is a sign that there are crucial issues at stake here. Something important is being discussed here. And so it becomes a speech, because if the characters pay more attention and dedicate more time to saying what they are saying, it means that we as readers should also attach more attention and more importance to the speeches. Now, let's look at an example of a speech by Linda. This was when Biff calls Willie Loman crazy and he compares him to his friend Charlie. Linda says, "You can't do that, can you? I don't say he's a great man. Willie Loman never made a lot of money. His name was never in the paper. He's not the finest character that ever lived, but he's a human being, and a terrible thing is happening to him. So attention must be paid." She's even nudging us to pay attention to what she's saying. He's not to be allowed to fall into his grave like an old dog. Attention. Attention must be finally paid to such a person. You call him crazy. Now, by drawing our attention to this, she's actually speaking generally to script analysis, where as we are reading a text, we should pay attention to certain speeches. Just like the speech that the father gives in 6 Characters in Search of an Author, where he talks about having multiple consciences and the fact that human beings should not be reduced to just a single event and punished forever for it. Now, Willie Loman, of course, is not any lofty character. His language is not lofty or anything. But something terrible is happening to him, and he needs to be given the needed attention. And that is the point of the whole play, which is a big example of Arthur Miller's Tragedy and the Common Man. That is the play that exemplifies his essay on the need for the common man to be the subject of tragedy. Now, another important thing you should look at when examining the language of a play is punctuation. Yes, the commas, the full stops, exclamation points, question marks, ellipses, and single and double dashes, they all have distinctive meanings within a play. And when you are analyzing a play, especially as an actor, it helps you because it helps you to express the character's thoughts accurately. Commas and semicolons are warnings that call for pauses for certain lengths. A colon demands attention to what follows. So you write something, you put a colon there, it means that you have to pay attention to what is going to follow. And then an exclamation point signals approval or disapproval. Just don't call him crazy. This was Happy's response to Biff calling their father crazy. And this is a disagreement. And so you see the exclamation mark there. Just don't call him crazy. And so it helps you, the actor, to know how to react in saying these lines. You don't just say, just don't call him crazy. Then you have not expressed the character's feelings accurately. You say, just don't call him crazy. Then you have done it properly because that is what it is supposed to do. It's a disagreement. And then dashes indicate an interrupted thought. He's got no character. There's a dash. Charlie wouldn't do this. So instead of continuing with that thought, he's got no character, and explaining why he's got no character, he goes off to talk about Charlie wouldn't do this, not in his own house. And then there is that dash also that says that there's an interruption, spewing out that vomit from his mind. So dashes, when you see a dash, it shows an interrupted thought, which signals you to take a detour with the next line. Ellipses, which are these dots that come right after a sentence, or in the middle of a sentence you see ellipses, these three dots. They tell you something has been left unsaid. So when you see those dots, it always points to this fact. And I think Linda, exactly, this is an example of ellipsis. Linda leaves here. She said, "You called him crazy." And then there are the three dots. They are ellipses. They tell you something has been left unsaid. So the expressive qualities of punctuation marks are meant to help actors feel the texture of the dialogue by adding extra expressiveness to the words, so that you don't just go rattling and reading it through. Imagine, he's got no character. Charlie wouldn't do this. You have left something huge out. Now, language has certain special qualities. You can either use language as a workman, just using it to express the facts of plot, character, idea, just that. Or you can recognize when dialogue has certain literary attractions of its own. Dramatists love language, and so some of them turn language into art. Others can just use it as, a way to express the facts of plot, character, and so on. It can do both, but then it is more appealing to read a dialogue that has been made sensuously attractive, as Aristotle puts it. The one that has some poetic feel to it. And so it is important for you to ask yourself, when you are reading a play, does the dialogue merely reveal the basic facts in a practical way, or does it also display a pleasing style of its own? Does it contain colorful speech? In other words, is it poetic? Now, prose dialogue generally runs straight ahead. Like when you're reading Death of a Salesman, when you're reading what do you call it? The Glass Menagerie is prose dialogue. It runs straight ahead. Poetry, on the other hand, always calls up associations from within itself and enriches its patterns of sound and meaning. So prose dialogue reveals plot, character, and idea, while poetic dialogue adds extra pleasure as literature. Poetic dialogue is more colorful. There's something beautiful about it. And so poetic dialogue has more emotional peaks and valleys that make it more vivid and rhythmic. Now, there are so many playwrights who have stopped using poetry in their writing. But then there are also others who have tried to maintain that, tradition of poetry. And so you can have authors like Wole Soyinka, William Butler Yeats, T.S. Eliot, Maxwell Anderson, F.K. Fiawu. They've all written in openly poetic dialogue. Others, like the modern and postmodern playwrights, just go ahead and write, like August Strindberg, Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Samuel Beckett, August Wilson, David Mamet, Harold Painter, August Wilson. I have mentioned August Wilson already. Sam Shepard. They have written prose that can often be as expressive as poetry. You can have post-colonial writers like Ifo Kojo. You have Martin Owusu and the others. They've all written in prose dialogue that has some kind of expressiveness that links it to poetry rather than writing in strict poetic dialogue. But you should always ask yourself these questions in order to understand whether the dialogue just expresses the facts of plot, character, or it calls out certain expressive associations to itself. Then you'll be able to tell whether it is poetry or prose that has that kind of poetic feel to it. Another aspect of language we can look at is dialects and accents. A dialect is a verbal departure from standard language. And so you can have various English dialects in the UK. You can have the Welsh, you can have the Cockney, and all that. And so dialects are characteristic of a particular group of speakers, and they have their own charm. So when you write a play about those particular group of people, then you have to be true to their dialect. Like Stanley in Death of a Salesman, the bartender. He said, there's a lot of people they don't like it private because when they go out, they like to see a lot of action around them because they are sick and tired to stay in the house by themselves. This clearly shows us that Stanley is coming from a particular place. He's not from New York. So his manner of speaking, he speaks a different dialect of English that is very different. Like the way in the South, in America, you have y'all, right? You have certain dialects of English. When you go to Canada, for instance, they cannot speak two words without adding a to it. All of these points as to where they are coming from. On the other hand, an accent is a particular way of pronouncing standard language. So whilst a dialect is a verbal departure from the standard language, you have an accent being a way of pronunciation. So the easiest way to talk about this is by comparing Nigerian and Ghanaian accents. So if you are going to say concern, I will say concern and Nigerian will say concern. It does not concern you, and so forth. I know you know all of these things. And so dialects and accents enhance plausibility. If you have a Nigerian within your play, you should be able to bring out some of these differences so that we know. It helps us know that, oh, this is indeed a Nigerian. It makes the situation more plausible. It aids in rapid recognition of given circumstances because it definitely tells you where you are or who is this person, where this person is coming from, and provide additional opportunities for emotional expression. Now, the language in Death of a Salesman. The play is written in prose. It is conversational, everyday language because of the relationship between the characters. And so the informal language represents the relationship between the characters, regardless of their station in life. When you look at somebody like Bernard, who is now a big shot lawyer going to argue a case in the high court, when he comes to have a conversation with Willie Loman, his manner of speaking is just as before. It's not very formal. It's not very formal. And that's not the kind of language he's going to speak in the law court. They have their own jargons, and he will also speak formally to the judge and the jury. So through dialogue, we get to understand the motivations and inner desires of the characters and their relationships, which drive home the idea of the play. So the lies and the confrontation are all delivered to us through dialogue. Biff tells Happy, the man don't know who we are. The man is gonna know. To Willie, he says, we never told the truth for 10 minutes in this house. And so it tells us that they have all been living a lie. They've been lying about everything. And this shows us why Biff suddenly realizes that all this while he thought that he had been a salesman to Bill Oliver. But he had never been. He was just a clerk. He was just a clerk. He was not a salesman. And so, when it all comes down to it, we know that the very reason why Willie Loman enters the sales business was because of Dave Singelman. When he saw him, even in his 80s, he says do you know he could just go into his room, wear his green slippers, and just make phone calls, even in his 80s. And he gets customers. And he goes like, that is the life. And so instead of following his brother to go search for gold in Alaska and make something of his life, he decides to become a salesman. But in the end, did Willie Loman die the death of a salesman? As part of his motivation for becoming a salesman, he tells Howard, do you know when he died? And by the way, he died the death of a salesman in his green velvet slippers in the smoker of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, going into Boston. When he died, hundreds of salesmen and buyers were at his funeral. But in the end, at the end of his life, Linda asks, why didn't anybody come? That is to his funeral. And Charlie said, it was a very nice funeral. And then she continues to ask, but where are all the people he knew? You have to constantly pay close attention to dialogue because it reveals character. It reveals the super objective of the character, and then we follow the minor objectives that the character follows in order to achieve it. It reveals personality through what the character says about himself, what others say about the character, what the character does, what the character says about others, and the character's values through their actions and in relation to the dialogue. It reveals the relationships between characters. It reveals the given circumstances. It helps us to know where we are, when the time is, what has happened in the past as well. Through the flashback and the dialogue that ensued between Bernard and Willie, we get to know what happened 15 years earlier. And then the background story. Yes, it leads us to the background story. And so when you're reading, it is important to pay close attention to the dialogue. The dialogue is what the playwright uses to express thought, to express relationships, to express the character's motivations, their objectives, and all that. And that is what transpires amongst the characters throughout the play. And so if you don't pay close attention to the characters, you will not be able to tell how they differ from each other. You will not be able to tell their motivations. You will not even be able to understand their background, because the way they speak and what they say helps us to understand where they are coming from and all that. And so it is really important that we look at dialogue. And so with this in mind, I do hope that you would pay close attention to the plays you read, because the dialogue tells us everything we need to know about the characters, about the situation, and ultimately the theme of the play. I'll see you in the next lesson where I do a total analysis of a Chinese play, Lady Precious Stream. See you.